The Saucony Kinvara 14, Saucony's lightest Kinvara to date. How does it hold up against past models, and what types of training runs is this shoe perfect for? Cheers y'all, how's it going? It's Ryan, aka I Run on Beer, here with my review of the Saucony Kinvara 14 running shoes. If you had watched a previous video I made talking about my running shoe rotation, I dropped a few hints that I was looking to upgrade my current Kinvaras to the new model, especially because Saucony made some pretty significant changes to the design. I think depending on who you ask, some people were thrilled with the changes, some folks not so much, but I was just itching to try the shoe out. It's a shoe that I have loved for quite a while. I've had Kinvaras in my running shoe rotation for quite some time, and so was just really interested to see how the new design changes would feel. As a quick disclaimer, as I mentioned, I absolutely love this shoe. I purchased these shoes with my own money. Nobody sent me these shoes to review. No one's paying me for this review. These are purely just my thoughts on the new Saucony Kinvara 14s. All that being said, let's jump into the specs of the shoe. Same as previous models, it is a neutral running shoe, but one thing I feel like the Kinvaras have always been known for is just how incredibly lightweight these shoes are, and they have managed to make it even lighter with this addition by half an ounce, down from 7.5 ounces to just 7 ounces. I don't know where they keep finding material to remove. They feel so minimalistic already, but somewhere they found an extra half ounce to remove with this model. Moving on to the drop of the shoe, that stays the same. It is a 4mm drop between the heel and the toe, but they did increase the overall stack height of the shoe up to 31 millimeters. This was one of those things that I think there were mixed reviews on. As I mentioned, this has really been known as a very minimalistic shoe, and so I think folks were a little bit concerned about how the ride would feel, how connected to the ground you would feel with the addition, those extra millimeters in the stack height. Part of that is an overall redesigned midsole, a redesigned rocker for the shoe, which I'll touch on in the review of the experience itself, but also a revamped Power Run foam technology. So I think just that's one of the biggest differences you notice out of the box on the shoe is obviously the midsole looks a bit different, a little bit thicker, but also just has a much different feel than previous models. And last but certainly not least, in terms of price, we get a little bit of a bump as well. I feel like we can toss it up to inflation, just a $10 addition. These shoes are up to $120 brand new. So that's it for the specs. Let's get into my actual experience and impression of the shoe, starting off with just some of the out-of-the-box impressions. So for that, I'm gonna pull up my old pair as well. These aren't the previous Kinvara 13s. These are actually the 12s. I've had these for quite a while. Did not test the 13s, but I'll talk about some of the difference between these two models. I mentioned already, you can certainly see the difference in the stack height, the additional midsole in the new Kinvara 14. The only other real significant difference that you notice right away is just a subtle difference in the placement, or I guess the design of the outsole. These shoes, I feel like, are known for just the exposed foam, the exposed midsole on the sole of the shoes, with just a little bit of outsole rubber in those high touch locations. So again, same location, just slightly different design here on the newer model. And then the other piece that you notice right away, I feel like I've talked about this with previous models as well, but it's just how minimal the upper of the shoe is. Again, this is something, maybe this is where they found that half ounce to remove, that just seems to get thinner and thinner somehow each year. And you can actually see, probably here, you can see directly through the material. It's just a very fine mesh with a little bit of structure in like the logo of the Saucony, just in a couple places to give it a little bit more form, a little bit better of a hold, but overall most of the upper is that really thin, sheer, incredibly lightweight mesh, continuing to make this shoe lighter and lighter somehow each year. And then just some aesthetics things I noticed, very minor. I really like the design of the eyelets this year. If you can see that, it's not like a hole in the midsole, it's actually like a little string loop that the laces go through. Again, purely aesthetic, but I love that design. And then also really like the addition of this loop on the heel for assistance in sliding the shoes on and off. I'm a person who tends to just shove my thumb in there when I'm pulling the shoe on, which tends to rub my thumb pretty raw, especially in the winter. So love the addition of just this simple little loop on the heel. It's got some elastic to it as well. Very easy to pull the shoes on and off. Again, very minor thing, convenience thing, but something I certainly appreciated. Now let's talk about the actual performance of the shoe, putting them on my feet and taking them out for the first run. Putting them on the feet, I will say, this is maybe one of the only concerns I have, but it's getting kind of nitpicky, and I think it's something that's going to work itself out. But putting these shoes on for the first time, they do feel a little bit snug walking around. So if you're a person who likes a little bit of extra wiggle room in the toe box, maybe go up half a size from what you're used to. But I will say, if you can go try them on, I would. I remember from the first pair of Kinvaras I tested, I had that same feeling a little bit snug when I first put them on, but the foam in the shoe, the sole of the shoe, etc., kind of forms to your feet. They have their form fit technology, and after a few runs, the fabric stretched itself out a little bit. My foot formed a little bit better within, or I guess the shoe formed a little bit better to my foot, and that was no longer a concern. So I'm holding out hope that that will be the same. I've only taken these out for a few miles, so I'm hoping after a couple of runs that these will feel much more comfortable. And I will say, although they felt a little bit snug walking around, once I was on the run, I didn't notice any kind of discomfort or anything like that. So again, holding out hope that that was just a kind of new shoe feel and something that it will work itself out over the next couple of weeks. Now, once they were on and I was moving, first impression, these things feel incredibly springy on your feet. And I mentioned they kind of have this redesigned rocker in the shoe. These feel very similar to performance shoes and even carbon plated shoes that I've tested in the past. And what I mean by that is, even just walking around, as soon as your weight shifts a little bit towards your toe, your foot immediately just wants to spring off of that toe. You can feel the shoe just wanting to rock forward. I have not had that experience with a non-racing shoe, non-performance shoe, so something I was very excited about. In addition to that, I will just say the overall springiness of the redesigned midsole is definitely apparent. These shoes were just feeling like they were raring to go with every step, just a little bit extra spring in the step, or we're just itching to go faster and faster. It was even somewhat difficult to hold myself back during those early warm-up runs because the shoes just felt like they wanted to go fast. And once I was moving, once I was on the run going a bit faster, that's when I noticed another one of the differences in this model, and that is just the overall kind of ground contact. I mentioned you've got more stack height here, you've got a redesigned midsole, and that is certainly apparent on the run. You just don't necessarily feel quite as connected to the ground as I have in Kinvara's past, but what I will say is you feel the shoe feels much more responsive, and again, that gets to the rocker, the springiness of the shoe. It does not feel like a high stack height shoe by any means. You don't feel extra cushion, if that makes sense. The sole is plenty firm. You just feel the springiness wanting to propel you forward. So I personally didn't mind it. I feel like that may be some of the complaints that others had, is they just wanted a more minimalistic shoe. I feel like they've moved away from that slightly in terms of minimalism in the sole itself, but I personally love the redesign here. The only negative, if you could even call it that, and again, we're getting very nitpicky here, a particular, I won't say pet peeve of mine, is I just feel like I have such a hard time finding shoes with the perfect length in laces. They're either too short or too long. It's so hard to find something just right. I do feel like these are just slightly longer than I would like, but the laces aren't flopping around by any means. It's not a deal breaker. They're just ever so slightly longer than I would typically prefer in my trainers. But again, getting incredibly nitpicky here. That is not going to sway me away from these shoes at all. And another thing I'll mention, just a redesign to the laces themselves. We've got these elasticy tubular laces that we're starting to see pop up on more and more shoes. Just so much more comfortable in the hand. I feel like give you a better fit when you're tying the shoes and adjusting the tightness, a much more snug feel as well. So I definitely appreciate that redesign. Just wish the laces were a hair shorter than what they came out to be. In terms of my overall impressions of the shoe, you've probably heard it come through already, but I absolutely love the redesign of these Kinvaras. I feel like when I tried on my first ever pair of Kinvaras, it was so different than any shoe that I've ever tried in all of the best ways. Such a fun run, had me excited to get out there. I just loved the feel of the shoes on my feet. I've been chasing that ever since, and I feel like the Kinvara 14s have replicated that. Again, in a different way. It is certainly a slightly different ride than previous Kinvara models, but I absolutely love the way these feel on my feet, how fast they make me want to go, especially as I'm looking to start training for some shorter distance races. I just feel like this is such a fun daily trainer, still falling into that daily trainer category, not necessarily needed for those fastest runs. You can do some slower runs in them as well, but just a really fun feel on the run, on your feet, and really, really excited to get some more miles under these things. Which brings me to how I plan to use them, or the runs I think these shoes would be perfect for. I mentioned it already. I don't necessarily think these shoes are meant to go slow. So recovery runs, endurance runs, those slower efforts, probably leaving these at home. But as soon as I start to branch into like that steady state running, just slightly faster than the endurance run, slightly out of my comfort zone, I think these are going to become my go-to shoe very quickly. Steady state, I think they're great for. Tempo runs, I think these are going to be perfect for. Even interval workouts as well. I'm very excited to see how these hold up under kind of my fastest paces. Typically for like all-out sprints, I might go for something with a little bit more of a tread or a little bit more of an outsole, but I am excited to try these on some of those fastest runs as well. And I even think these might become some of my go-to racing shoes for anything from like 5K to 10K distance, which is exactly the types of races I'm training for now. I really feel like I could not have purchased these shoes at a better time. If you'd like to snag a pair, I certainly highly recommend them after my first workout. I'm sure you'll be seeing much more of them in my training videos, but you can snag them on the Saucony website. I mentioned they're about $120 on there right now. You do have the option to split that up into 4 interest-free payments if you'd like. Or at least at the time of this recording, when I checked on Amazon, depending on the size and color combination you're going for, they had them as low as $70, including these ones, the bright yellow 10.5s I have, $70 on Amazon. So I'll include the Amazon link as well. That is an affiliate link if you choose to purchase them on Amazon, but how can you pass up those savings? I am certainly thrilled that I got these shoes when I did, and I am just itching to take them out on some faster runs to really let these things fly. I'll also just include a note. I know Saucony also recently released the Kinvara Pros, which are a carbon-plated daily trainer, a carbon-plated model of the Kinvaras. I am certainly intrigued, but not sold on wanting to shell out the extra money for a carbon plate in training shoes. Although, as I said, if I am leaning towards making these a race day shoe, maybe the Kinvara Pros would be a great option to reserve exclusively for those races. Again, just to amp up the performance as much as I can. But for now, the Kinvara 14s are filling the exact need I have in training. Absolutely loving these shoes and just looking forward to the next run. If you enjoyed the review, I hope you will give it a thumbs up and share it around, help other folks find the video. If this is your first time tuning in, I hope you'll consider subscribing to I Run on Beer. If you have any questions about the shoes, any specifics, let me know. I'll try to answer those in the comments below. And until next time, I'll see you around. Cheers.